Hello and welcome to Who Made That, the podcast about interesting games and the people who made them. And today we're joined by Jake Birkett and Helen Carmichael to talk with them about a new game called Forbidden Solitaire. So welcome.
Thanks for having us on.
Hey guys.
Yeah, nice to meet you both and speak to you. I would love it if you could tell us, we're obviously going to ask some questions about your background, but just a very brief kind of intro on your backgrounds and your specific role with Forbidden Solitaire.
You want to go first, Helen?
Sure. My background originally was in science journalism, which has nothing to do with making games. But so quite a few years ago now, I came up with an idea for Regency Solitaire and ended up switching tracks to work with Jake, who was already in the game dev sort of field. So that's what I've been doing ever since, gradually learning how to become a better game designer. But I've also done a lot of writing for games. I've done quite a lot of marketing for games. I've also just run the company and been a jack of all trades. So that's my background. And with Forbidden Solitaire specifically, I did a little bit of design work, but predominantly I was on marketing. So that was my role.
Yeah, so, I mean, I've been coding since I was a kid on the 8-bit and 16-bit machines and making games as a hobby for a long time. But I went full-time indie 21 years ago and made a whole bunch of games on my own, and then as Helen said, she joined in and we made Regency Solitaire, then we made Shadowhand, which has turn-based combat, then Ancient Enemy and some other games, and then we eventually released Forbidden Solitaire, which is solitaire with turn-based combat and horror, and it's done quite well, and we can talk about that. So yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Andre.
No, you first.
Well, it's a wonderful game. It really scratched for me the itch, the sort of nostalgia of discovering games for the first time in the 90s when, you know, you would download something from a shady website, or a friend would give you a box that had some floppy disks in it or something, and it was sort of like you never know what this is until you put it in and try it. And that feeling of like sort of discovery with no information, it just gave me flashbacks to my childhood, digging through bins and like looking for new games, which was really cool.
Yeah. And I think I discovered, I think we met with you guys, maybe not Helen, but I think Jake, we met with you way before when I was still on Tiny Build. I think we met at Reboot. And I think one of my producers back at Tiny Build told me that he's actually hooked with your solitaire games. And he said for him it was such a guilty pleasure. And I'm like, this is solitaire. Like, what's special about it? And I started playing and realized I love this. Just like I know it's solitaire. It's a simple mechanic, casual game, but I think the level of polish that you had in any of the games got me hooked. And I think when I left Tiny Build and then we started Forklift, I met you again at Reboot, and then I decided to jump in back Solitaire, because back then you already had the second version out. And I actually, even at that Reboot, I was like, honest to God, I was playing in my room. I was playing Regency Solitaire. I could not stop because it's like, let's just one more level. What's like, it's going to be like another 5 minutes. And it's such a, and then when I saw that you guys are working on the horror version, I was, it was for me such great news that you're making such a twist to your mechanic.
Yeah.
And so speaking of games that we all like work on many games, but before we jump into other topics, we typically start with a question of like, what did you guys recently play? I bet you have more time now that you've shipped the game. So we want to just, what's the latest and greatest in your library and what would you share? And
Well, whilst I was working on the game, one game I really wanted to play, and we had it on our launch calendar to keep an eye out for because we didn't want to clash with it, and that was Resident Evil 9, Resident Evil Requiem. Like, I'm a big fan of the whole series, survival horror games. And actually, when we shipped, the first game we played wasn't that, because Silent Hill 2 was on sale, the remake, or remaster or whatever. So we played that, Helen and I. Then I beat it and then played Resident Evil 9, and I've just beat that like yesterday or something. And it's a really good game. So yeah, That was me. What about you, Helen?
Well, I had Strange Antiquities by the same people who made Strange Horticulture. That was on my list for a really long time. And I think my son bought it for me for Mother's Day or something, which was really sweet. So I finally had that just about the time we were launching the game. And I love those games. I think they're really beautifully made. They're just really good storytelling, and it's all beautifully put together, and it's lovely. Meanwhile, I got quite addicted to Factorio a while ago, but I played it about as much as I could. So completely different. Another friend recommended I should try the Dyson Sphere program. So I've literally just started that, but I haven't got very far yet. I've literally just landed on the planet and done a few things and figured out the basic tech tree. So yeah, all sorts really. Yeah.
Yeah, that one's so addictive. Dyson Sphere. Yeah. And
it looks good. It looks good.
Funny enough, we just had a talk, Tucker and I, with somebody. I cannot go into detail too much, unfortunately, right now, but we just talked with somebody who was helping market Strange Antiquities. That's a game that I need to try still.
Oh, that would be an absolute pleasure. They're really beautifully made games. Very nice.
As well as Match 3 games, which I made 7 of, and then Solitaire games, which we've also made 7 of, funnily enough. I also made T-30 with Dejaban Games, and that's this 30-minute city builder experience. And when I was developing that, I kept saying to Helen, you won't be interested in this. Let me just finish the game and we'll ship it. And then she played it and really liked it and played it loads and loads. Right. And maybe that helped you get into this sort of city building.
Yeah, it's
idea.
one of my most played games on Steam. It's a bit ironic that I'm playing Jake's game, but I didn't have anything to do with developing it. It's just there, and if I just want to play something for 30 minutes, that's the one I go to.
That's what it's there for. And we did start developing another city builder as a prototype, and it got quite far. But then we were at the point where we would need more funds to sort of get it to a publisher level.
We should take
and
a
we
look
talked
at this,
about that. We talked about that before a little bit. But then we ended up pivoting back to Regency Solitaire 2 because some funding came along to help with that. And so we went with what we knew. And that city builder is languishing at the side at the moment.
Yeah, we definitely are gonna talk about that then. For me, I guess recently, obviously at the same time when you guys were releasing Forbidden Solitaire, we just recently came out on 2 game of ours, like Your Words and Spotter, Dig or Die. It's not a plug here. I mean, it's just the fact that we play a lot of our games, and this was a time when we did spend a lot of time with those. At the same time, I recently jumped back into Mad Runner and Snow Runner. We have a game that's going to announce soon that is really coming on the heels of that, but the indie and actually horror game too. So, just to refresh my memory of these simulation games, I'm spending time in there. Pretty hardcore games, to be honest.
Staying on the road.
That was absolutely, yeah. And I think the more I played, the more I realized how much of a I think I want to look closer to the audience of these, but it feels to me that these games are, in the really strange intersection of games that are hardcore games, but also games for almost non-gamers, because they, in a way, they're also casual. A lot of players would play only them, similar to like FIFA or something like that. But we can get into that later. Tucker, how about you?
I'm gonna plug one of the best games I've played in forever. I really love games that are short and approachable in my personal time, because between playing our games and I have 3 children, it can be hard to dive into, the city builders and the automation games like I used to. So recently I played Librarian, Tidy Up the Arcane Library.
Oh, I know this one, yeah.
Yeah, that looks good.
Incredible game. It's just a wizard's library, and all the books are on the floor, and you have to pick them up and shelve them appropriately. And it's incredible. So I really enjoyed that. I also really enjoyed the demo for a new one from Critical Reflex called About Fishing, which is I love fishing games, but this one is like fishing / murder mystery with PS1 graphics. So really interesting and fun. And then, of course, my sort of like longtime game that will probably always be on this list when asked is Caves of Cud, which is a traditional roguelike. Yeah. Super incredible game that I've been playing off and on almost since the beginning. But I've been enjoying it a lot recently.
Before we get an angry call for PlayStack, you misplaced about fishing.
Right. It's Arctic Eggs was Critical Reflex, I think, right? And this is PlayStack.
Right.
But
and
amazing one.
I have a theory about a lot of video games, not all, but many of them are about tidying up. So, I mean, obviously the Arcane Library one is kind of tidying up. So Solitaire, right? You clear the layout, you tidy up the cards, you have, problems along the way, but you tidy them up. Even Space Invaders is tidying up, or Resident Evil, you tidy up the level of all the zombies, right? Okay, speedrunners run past them, but I like to make sure every room is clear so I can stroll on through without fear next time. Of course, there's always another one hiding in a cupboard or something, but yeah, tidying up.
It reminds me of this like, was there like some sort of, I don't know, like the theory or like categorization of gamers into different like types?
Yes.
Was
Bartos or something, or Bartok's theory of gamers or something like that. I'm not sure.
Wasn't there like, obviously there's a thing called completionist and achievers and like, I don't remember the terminology, but that it does remind me of that, which I think I agree.
Yeah, competitive ones as well. But there must be maybe the completionist is the tidying one. Not sure.
Yeah. I've tried to have this conversation with my wife about how fundamentally it's like going from chaos to order. But then she always comes back with, why aren't you better at cleaning the house then? So I try not to bring that one up anymore. But I do think it's a thread that runs through a lot of what grabs my attention.
Well, I think because
games.
like the games give you that experience without flaws. It just gives you the perfect flaw of like you just make the go in real life. It's never clean. It's like it's really messy. You start with one thing, then your HDG kicks in, and you get distracted, and then you start another thing. So like it's never like this pleasure of pure joy.
And real life doesn't have particle effects or cool sound effects or game feel, all the stuff I spend a lot of time on making feel good, right?
Yeah.
Or a meta game, like you don't get a reward after 5 minutes and after half an hour, and every so often you get to upgrade your skills,
Yeah, if my vacuum cleaner had stars that lit up or something as I went, maybe it would be better. I don't know.
I think there's a new Dyson that I haven't tried yet, but I think maybe they have this thing that there's a laser in the thing that goes along the floor, and it basically lights up all the particles of dust within a certain radius. I haven't tried this really. Now that I think about it, I think this is the ultimate gamification, because at least obviously there's no particle effects, but at least it gives you the exact spot of where you need to go with the thing. So it makes it much more visual. So anyway, congrats on launching Forbidden Solitaire.
Thank you.
We already, I think it's clear that we all are the fans here, and I think because I've rewatched a couple of the other podcasts you guys have done and read some materials, and I also follow you, Jake, on Twitter. So before, when you guys announced the game, you said that maybe this is the one meaning that it's going to be like really go on top of everything you've done before in terms of numbers. So I wonder, maybe we start with that, and like, was it the one for you? How are your expectations against what really happened there? And overall, how do you feel after release? It must have been a big deal.
It was a big deal. What do you think, Helen?
I think it took us a little while to get used to something being a success. Does that make sense? I think a lot of our previous games have had a lot of promise, and some of them have even had a really great run up to launch or a modestly good launch. But I think often, in the past, we've thought, oh, this could be the one, and this has got all the right ingredients. And then something else has happened that meant it wasn't quite as good, or it didn't take off as much as we thought, or it did, but then the numbers dwindled much faster than we expected, or, various other scenarios like that. In some cases, we had a really great promotional thing lined up that then didn't happen, stuff like that. So I think we were optimistic. We were very optimistic before the game came out, but we also just had this little piece, like everybody has a bit of doubt, but our previous experience meant we probably had more doubt than a lot of people. We were trying to be very realistic, like this could just do kind of okay. So, I think it's taken us a little while to sort of adjust to the idea that, it's paid for itself and more, and that's really nice. And we can think about what to make next with far fewer worries than perhaps with many of our previous games.
Yeah. And I'm a sort of numbers guy. I share numbers on our Patreon and on social media and so on. And I invented the Birkett ratio, the whole thing about, wishlist before launch, what kind of ratio of those convert into sales in week one, right? And so, the thing with this game is we launched with 72,000 wish lists, and the most we'd ever had before was 7,000 for Ancient Enemy. So this was 10 times as much. And we got that in 2 days of announcing this game. So the first trailer that came out kind of went viral, because one thing we must mention is obviously this was a team effort. So we teamed up with Night Signal Entertainment, which is Nick and David, and they had released Home Safety Hotline before, which was a very successful horror game, very good, fun one. And we knew that their fans would sort of come along for the ride as well as our Solitaire fans. And, we both got our own sort of Discords, and they've got a Discord and we've got social media and all this sort of stuff. So we were bringing a lot of people to this joint venture, and their trailer was so good. It really just did hype the game, and we got so many wish lists straight away. That's when we thought, okay, wow, we've got something on our hands, because we wanted to test, is this idea good? We thought it was good. That's why Helen and I agreed to do it. We got an email, a pitch from Nick and said, this seems pretty good. We should go ahead. But we wanted to test it. And the test proved good. And then the whole time we were working on it, it was so easy to market, right? Well, okay, Helen's going to say, I did tons of marketing and it was hard work. Yes, agreed. But whatever we did seemed to have 10 times the result of any other previous game, even though we were doing similar things. Like we got accepted into many different events, things like Day of the Devs and other such things we'd get rejected for normally. And it just felt easy, and people were saying, we're going to buy this on day one. And so I had a good feeling about the game the whole time, but I still had the wish list as a guide, and I did run some numbers, and I thought, it's probably going to be within this range, the upper end being, silly numbers, which it wasn't. It wasn't silly numbers, to be clear, but it was good, solid numbers. And those numbers are such that, yes, it gives us freedom to think about what we want to do next carefully. Well, we've already thought about it and talked about it, but it means we're not doing the usual scrabble for money or going, oh my God, that launch didn't go as well as normal. What do we do? So this is a very novel experience for us, and it has taken time to learn to relax and sort of go, oh, phew, okay, it was okay actually.
The reason I asked about the expectations and how the launch live up to that, because you said that you had 72,000 wish lists.
Yeah.
Before launch, and then previous games had like 7,000, right?
Yeah.
So seeing that, like the day before launch, almost hitting that 70,000 wish list, does it make something your expectations? Because in some ways, expectations can be our worst enemy. And you guys were doing it for so long, so you obviously know how to deal with that. So I want to talk about this and how did you have your expectations in a much higher place, or as you said right now, maybe you just went off the Birkett ratio and expected, okay, so then the game probably is going to sell like anywhere like 15,000 copies, 20,000 copies in the first week. Was that your expectation level, or how did you deal with that at all?
Okay, well, when we sold Ancient Enemy, when that came out, that had 7,000 wish lists, but the Birkett ratio we got for that was pretty much 0.5, which was really good. So we sold like 3,500 units in week one off 7,000 wish lists. These days, if you had 7,000 wish lists, I would be very worried for most people's games if they were a commercial prospect, because Simon Carles did a recent study And it was sort of, the Birkett ratio was 0.14 if you had less than 25,000.
Yes.
If you had more, it's 0.1. So I was looking at, okay, for this game, let's say it gets 0.1 or lower. This would be our worst case scenario. We would get 7,000 unit sales week 1 or worse. Especially if like the organic sales didn't kick in, because it's not just sales from Wishlist. This is why it's not a straight conversion of Wishlist to, you make X sales from Wishlist and Y from organic, and then you add them together, right? And if the Steam algorithm doesn't show you around, you're stuffed. But I said, we've got fans, we've got a good following. The demos performed really well. People were loving the demo and playing it to the end. Streamers were loving it. And so I thought, well, this means that we could get a Birkett ratio of something like 0.2. So I was actually saying that's our medium good value, and I based values on that. We actually got higher than that. We got 0.23 or something, right? So nice. That was pretty good. We did have hopes that, we might get 0.5, or it might go viral in a sort of, not exactly Balatro way, but, at least more viral. Right. But, the state of Steam is such these days that we pushed the launch back a whole week to avoid clashing with Vampire Crawlers, not sequel exactly of Vampire Survivors, because it was a dungeon crawler game. We saw it coming out. We were like, whoa, let's not launch that week. But we launched the same day as 5 other games that had more wishlist than us based on follower count and so on, including a Might and Magic game that had probably 1 million, an Invincible beat-em-up game, and some other indie games. So, we had 72,000 and there were more popular games than us on the same day. And we could have changed day, but really there's no good day these days, So
I think that April overall was just like a bloodbath. I said, we also launched 2 games, and then even on the same day, I think with you guys, there was another game our friends launched, Inconveni.
We know the one, I know it, It had more wishlists than us, probably.
It had a ton of wishlists, and it's just the whole April was just like so difficult. I don't know why, but it just felt. And the same thing happened with February's Steam Next Fest, I think, as well.
Right,
it was
because everyone was trying to avoid Next Fest, then they were trying to avoid the Steam sale, the March one, then they're trying to avoid GDC week. It's not the best week because, whatever. And everybody was probably like, this is the week to launch, and then Vampire Crawlers, and they're like, we'll shift it. And then, it was a bloodbath, but we had to launch then because we'd spent longer on it than we planned, and we told people April and stuff, and we were definitely running out of money as well. Right. So all of these things, but day one was better than any of our previous launches, and it was really good. But what happens on Steam is that it started to drop really quickly, and I thought, if this drop continues, it's going to be bad news. And I had a bit of a wobble after 24 hours, like, oh my God, it's just all our fans have bought it and there's no organic discoverability. But then it sort of leveled out and was okay, and it had a sort of thick tail, which has gone on for a long time,
Getting the overwhelmingly positive helps a lot.
That really helps.
Quite quickly as well.
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing that I think gave me some confidence was we felt as if we had good quality wish lists. Because, I mean, it's one thing for people to smash the wish list button on, any random game they see in Next Fest or whatever, but like how many of us actually go back and purchase? But what we were getting was, as Jake's saying about the hardcore fans, but also other people were really like, I cannot wait for this. People were begging us to bring it out. The conversion rate from wishlist has been really good. And even as we've gone on and gathered more wishlists in the first few weeks, even then when we've gone on sale, the conversion's been really good. So I feel like people who find it and like it really like it. And when they say they're going to wishlist it, they're seriously considering buying it. And I think also the reason that what helps that is the fact that it's very clear what it is. I mean, if you don't like strange dungeon crawler games where you can pop your eyeballs out by playing cards wrong, don't play this. Right, it's pretty, it's not a cozy game. It's not a roguelike. It's not, it says very clearly what it is. And so I think when people do like it and they wishlist it, they're really then happy to play it. So that's good. It's been really helpful to have a very clear,
A lot of games, obviously, as a publisher, we see many successes and many failures. And when people get a game and realize it's not what they expect, it's one of the biggest, probably either number 1 or number 2 failures, I think. And so for Forbidden Solitaire, I think it was definitely like zero issues with that, because you just look at one screenshot. You just don't even need 2 or 3. You immediately understand what you're getting into, because just you see the mechanics and you see that the vibes are there in terms of the visuals as well. So it's immediate
the retro look.
communication.
Yeah. And that's bound to help with the review score as well. I mean, there's a few people who are like, oh, I wish it was a roguelike or whatever. And it's like, well, it's not, that's not what we're doing. Or I wish you could do more in the desktop, like some other desktop, things. But that's not what this game is. It's just a framing for the game, really. So there's a few people like that. But ultimately, that's 4% of reviews. So we're not too bothered.
Yeah. Something, Helen, you said that about the quality of the wish lists. There's been an ongoing talk about this, about the quality, about the wish lists are becoming older, do they expire, whatever. I think what I see more and more of is the wish, and I'm not alone. I'm sure people have done, I think Simon has done a piece on this. I don't remember exactly what it was, but like the wish lists that are coming from showcases are often like convert worse, because people are, just like tapping the wishlist button on many shiny things at the same time.
Yeah.
And I also seen the same thing with a lot of games that have a lot of praise on Twitter. They gain a lot of wishlists from there, but somehow there's at least, I don't know if there's a trend. I don't know if somebody has done any actual research on that, but it feels like there's more than a few games that had a lot of wishlists driven by the Twitter. And it seems like those also did not convert as well. I don't know if you've seen any of this with Forbidden Solitaire, or was Twitter even a factor for you, or no?
I think Twitter was definitely helpful in getting the word out, and Blue Sky as well.
Blue Sky was better. I mean, it did have more virality.
It did go a bit further,
really?
actually.
Yeah, for us.
For us, yeah. But we did use both. Yeah. Instagram also we started to have a bit more traction on, because we hadn't used it a great deal previously for our other games, but we did use this more. And I think a lot of that as well was to do with, it was quite helpful that we were 2 different studios for a start. So we already had 2 different bunches of fans, and we had 2 different accounts. And very often one of us would make one bit of content, another would make another bit of content, and then we'd cross post on each other's things and comment on each other's things. And different people from our different various groups of followers would find stuff. Also, it was a really big team kind of ensemble effort. So we've had musicians involved. We've had a lot of actors involved. We've had other people from other studios involved. All sorts of people have been involved in some way or another, and a lot of them have got accounts. So especially the musicians and people who made a soundtrack, they'll be posting on their account. So in that way, it spread sort of organically through people we actually knew and who cared a bit about it. So again, I think it is that sort of quality thing, and of having that proper interaction with people who actually, are genuinely into something, rather than maybe thousands and thousands of likes, but then no attraction. But going back to what you mentioned about the showcases, it was interesting that there were some showcases that seemed on Steam that seemed a lot smaller and more niche, but 1 or 2 of those that were kind of horror related, actually we saw a lot of traffic from them, and a lot of wish lists, considering the size of the event, where some of the bigger, broader events still gave us plenty of traffic, but the sort of percentage of wish lists from those was smaller. So I don't think it's, or rather, I do think it's worth finding niche events, even ones that aren't particularly huge. If they're like a really good fit for your game, it can still be worthwhile, I think. Yeah.
I was going to say that if you look at our wish list graph over time, and I've discussed it with some other people, it just goes up gradually. There's a few spikes here and there, and it goes up from the beginning to the end fairly smoothly. And it isn't like all from one event, like one big event that's suddenly given us a load of wish lists and maybe Next Fest. It's a continual thing from fans, multiple events, private demo, public demo, Next Fest, new trailers, new announcement things. The whole thing just kept going the whole time. And we did continually market the game, right? So, and on multiple channels. And I think when it first came out and went viral, I did have that fear that this is a viral game on social media. Is it really going to convert later on? Because I've seen other ones, like you say, have gone viral and maybe haven't delivered the goods later on. It was just people liking it for the meme sort of thing.
Yes.
I thought, my fear was, are they doing it for this? And I couldn't ever really let go of that fear until we shipped and I saw the launch numbers.
Really?
Yeah, no, I couldn't. I became,
even after you saw the demo,
I became more
really
confident after the demo.
Right.
Yes, because of the
but
way
still
people
have
loved
this
it.
this fear.
Yeah, I think it's just in me.
novelty?
It's actually it's actually, where does it come from? It comes from a financial insecurity of being an indie dev for 20 years and having games flop. It's just like, this could still happen. But it reduced with the positive reception of the demo. And then on launch day, yes, I was like, okay, phew. But I wasn't like, I was saying to somebody else that there was a video going around recently of a guy called Cakes who looked at their launch numbers on launch day and we're like, oh my God, and we're crying because they were so overwhelmed with it. And for me, it was like, okay, these are kind of about what I'm expecting and it's okay, you know, so I wasn't feeling that sort of intense emotion. And this was my 17th game. So I wasn't feeling that. Now, if it had 10 times, maybe I'd have cried, but it didn't. So.
Yeah. I mean, streamers were a really important part of getting the message out as well. And I think that's one of our marketing beats was we put out a demo that was sort of half finished because we wanted to show it around at Halloween, it being a horror game. We weren't ready to put the public demo out. So, for example, our shop screen just had like a picture of a hand, which was going to have gems in it and a little sign that said shop coming soon. There was no shop. It wasn't built yet, but we put it out anyway to streamers.
Right.
And we managed to get it in front of a few key horror streamers. And again, this was one aspect where Night Signal Entertainment were very helpful as partners in this because they had already had some of their games streamed by those people. So they were willing to give our new demo a try. And that was really good. And that was quite reassuring for us. Like, yes, this game streams well, because that was really important that we wanted streamers to be able to enjoy it. We wanted it to be this fairly short experience, a linear experience with a story, with, you know, enough stuff for them to react to, still, you know, playing cards in a relaxed way, chatting to their friends, but also able to react to the funny story and things that happen. And so doing that kind of proved that it was streamable and that the bigger streamers did enjoy it and that their fans did enjoy it. So that was really good. And that came along even before our public demo, which also then did really well because that actually was polished and the shop did work.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah. The funny thing about that early demo was people liked the basic gameplay that we put in and the basic combat, but they were mostly sold on probably the vibes that Nick and David had done so well. And we knew that we were going to add a shop with loads of gems, which are essentially power-ups, okay? And we were going to add loads of jokers, and they were a really key part of the gameplay that were going to make it awesome. And those weren't even in yet, and people liked it. And we knew that this other stuff was just a value add, and it was just clearly going to enhance the gameplay.
Improve it and more.
Yeah, and we found, you know, when we shipped that some people loved the gameplay but weren't bothered about the story. Okay, fine, maybe that was some of our fans. Some people loved the story and weren't bothered about the gameplay. But anyone that loved them all, the gameplay and the story and the vibe, it was just like everything hits at once, and they couldn't stop playing it until they beat it, you know.
Some people played the demo multiple times as well. We knew from the sort of bucketed time list. I think in the end, something like 25,000 people have downloaded the demo, I think, before we switched it off. But even within that first few days, there was 10,000 within 2 or 3 days of us launching it. And it takes about half an hour, 35 minutes or so on average for people to play it. And we'd see people, there's this little tail of people who are playing it for 3 or 4 hours. And we're like, what are they doing? And they just go back to the beginning and playing it over and over again. Exactly. And I think that gave us, encouraged us to think, when we add all the other levels, these people are going to love it. And also, Jake and Callum on coding have done a bunch of work since we launched to add more content so that those people who want to keep playing it on and on and on can come up with other ways of enjoying the same levels. Yeah.
Yeah. A new game plus mode with a new difficulty and, you know, stuff like that. So people can stay in the game if they want to.
They want to. Yeah. Once the main campaign's finished.
Yeah.
Nice. Can we talk about the origin a little bit? I'm curious, where the concept came from, and you know how you sort of kicked it off, and maybe also how you ended up working, you know, with a partner.
Yeah.
It sounds like Night Signal. They sent an email to you, right? First, was that how it happened? And I wonder what was their motivation, and how did you? Was it immediately already an idea coming from them? Let's do this and that, and then ended up becoming Forbidden Solitaire, or did it went left and right before it ended up doing this?
Well, you did a whole podcast. Basically, I think the spark of the idea came out of Nick Lives' head. But Jake, you did a whole podcast chatting with him recently, didn't you, about that?
It was
how he was planning to pitch it in the first place. So maybe you should take that.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting. So, in fact, and I also read an interview that added more light on this. We're gradually finding out more as well through these interviews. What happened was that those guys, they actually were part running another studio or something, and they worked 5 years on some kind of game, and it actually flopped, they said. And around then, or sometime a while ago, they saw my 2016 GDC talk about building sustainable business, and then they decided to sort of make smaller, faster games, and from that came Home Safety Hotline, which did really well. And so they knew who I was, and we were following each other on socials.
So the whole idea was like the whole new studio was inspired by your talk as well.
That's what they said. So I'm not trying to blow my own trumpet, but they were just like, okay, we put too much in this. It didn't succeed. Let's do shorter experiences. Yeah. But in a way, that's kind of made them more focused, which is kind of interesting. So what happened was they were actually going to pitch us Home Safety Hotline Solitaire, Nick said. But he thought about it and said, actually, maybe I shouldn't be going to this experience studio and saying, do you want to make my IP? But I said to him, maybe we'd have accepted because it was a pretty good idea. But he went away and thought about it some more and came back with a 1-page document for Forbidden Solitaire. And it was actually because he played Shadowhand Solitaire, which we'd released in November 2024. A casual game without any real combat because we've simplified that version. He really loved it. And then sent us this 1-pager saying Forbidden Solitaire, spooky horror game. You find this old CD-ROM, and I'm old enough that I played all these old CD-ROM games like you, Tucker, and back in the day, and so that had immediate appeal to me. And my calculus was just, this cannot sell worse than if we made Regency Solitaire 3. Which Helen and I had been to Scotland and taken photos, and we'd done all this design on the story.
Yeah, we'd done some pre-production on that.
We were ready to roll.
Yeah.
And we slept on the idea because I showed Helen the email and she said,
well, we were both really excited.
Yeah.
We just both, sometimes when you just read an idea, and I know that, okay, maybe ideas are to a penny. Maybe devs and their friends are always going, oh, I've had a great idea for a game. And everyone sits down and goes, yeah. But I think we've been around enough times to temper our expectations a little bit.
Right.
When we both read this pitch, we both went, yeah, that is a really, really good idea. That could really work, So we were very, very enthusiastic and quite ready to sort of pivot and scrap our previous plans.
Well, we did. We cancelled T3 and then we drew up a contract and very quickly came up with this early prototype. And to be clear, there's been a very separate sort of division of labour. So Night Signal Entertainment have supplied all the art, the music, done the filming and the some of
FMV
the audio,
sequences.
the FMV sequences, and we've done the programming design, and then all of us have done the sort of marketing, right? But one of the things appeals to us was we did not have much money in the bank, and we didn't think we could survive long making a game, and we certainly couldn't afford to make a game and pay for all the art, audio, and everything else. So because they were providing that, they brought something to the table. Like I get a lot of emails from people suggesting, should we do this? Shall we do that? And nobody brings enough to the table. It's like you code and design the whole thing and, I've received the money. And this was a clearly good division of labor. And we kept that throughout the whole project. We trusted them to do what they did best, which was make cool horror stuff. And they trusted us to do game design and programming. And there was definitely discussions about all of those aspects as a team, but we mostly stayed in our own lane, if that makes sense. And that worked very well.
I mean, the other thing, I was just going to mention, they're also, when we first got this pitch, we didn't know them. We hadn't met them or spoken to them or anything. It wasn't like we were sort of buddies from conferences or anything like that. Our paths hadn't crossed other than like perhaps on social media a tiny bit. But they're just such nice people, and we just totally got along with them. And we have we laugh at the same jokes.
Yeah. Well, it was a risk. It was a definite
huge risk.
And we thought, let's try and get this sort of early slice together and see how that goes. And if we still get on, then we can keep going. But it did. It worked. The whole thing worked. And we said to them we'd be happy to work with them again. And they said the feeling's mutual. So that's good.
Interesting, because you also said that you didn't have a lot of money in the bank, and this comes back to you being really rational and making trying to do some risk, but not to go crazy with it. So I guess you started this, and then maybe you would give it a couple of months, see how it goes, and then see if that's actually should continue, or there's you need to pivot and do something else.
But we spun something up very rapidly because it was in December that they contacted us with this pitch. And by the end of February, we put out our teaser trailer and our Steam page.
Beginning of February.
Was it the beginning?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we spent January localizing Shadowhand Solitaire. So.
Yeah. So we put something out really, really quickly. And the other thing is, of course, this trailer we put out had various bits of gameplay in it, but a lot of that was sort of bodged together with bits of previous engines we had and a bit of new art and some sort of special effects that were added on afterwards. And it was really cobbled together. But the main centerpiece of it was a bunch of Night Signal Entertainment and their friends standing in a car park in Utah, sort of waving placards and saying, "It's not meant to be this violent, it's fine, solitaire." And that just seemed to sell it to everybody, right?
This is actually another thing I wanted to ask. It sounded like, I think I heard this from one of the other podcasts you did last summer, is that you basically made the trailer before you started doing most of the code. Was that correct? So basically, trailer came before you started. So this is the thing that now becomes more popular among indies, which was previously more. I've seen this more with AA games, where you would start with big trailer, sell the concept, sell the idea, see that it actually performs well, and then you continue production. And we see more of the indies also doing that. Was that a conscious, was that a specific choice, strategic choice to do that, or was it necessity, or was it some other idea behind it?
It was definitely strategic. One thing, though, admittedly, we had the Ancient Enemy engine, which this game was built upon. So we were able to get some assets from Nick, plug them into our engine, and all of a sudden we had, a working solitaire game with a different visuals, right? And so some of that was captured for Nick in some sort of screenshots and sort of for the store page, but some of it was done in Premiere, and we
had the UI overlaid over the top and stuff to fake it, and all sorts of things that were just bodged together just to make it look how it would look roughly.
But having an existing engine did save us probably months of time at least to get that in there. I guess it could have been all mocked up in Photoshop or something, but we wanted to test it very early and see whether it was going to be a goer, and it clearly was. So we cancelled another thing we were going to do. We were going to make Spooky Bonus 2, which was a sequel to a 2013 Match 3 game. I was going to just do that for Halloween, and we said, let's cancel that and extend this game. It was originally going to be a 6-month game. And we said, let's maybe work on it 8 to 9 months and come out at Halloween. And it took 15 months. So just bear that in mind. This is how game estimates go. It still took way longer, but we threw everything kind of at it within that timescale, more or less. But we did also keep a separate list of stretch goals of things we could have done. And sometimes they're the things that people mention. Oh, it'd be great if the game did this or that. But there just wasn't time to do that. But we added, say, New Game Plus within 2 weeks of launch. So that was one of the stretch goals.
Did the four of you have a discussion about what you would do if the trailer had fallen flat, if it had gone the other way? Do you think you would have continued? Would you have pivoted on the idea, or?
Well, certainly contractually, that was dealt with in terms of sort of who owned what at that point, what we could do with the IP, and
whether we could walk away from it if either of us wanted to walk away, that kind of thing.
We made sure that everybody could walk away and go, actually, this isn't going to work. Though I still had this vibe that it could still not do worse than one of our existing games, which is it's still fairly positive, so, and then it turned out to be the case. But you need protections like that in your contract. You need to be able to walk away and pivot. And because it was so soon, we could have done that and gone back to Regency Solitaire 3. It's sad that game will probably never get made now, because I think it would have been nice, but it wouldn't have put us in the same position we are now. So
yeah, interesting. So you guys have done a lot of solitaire games. I have not played solitaire much since the days of Windows 95 or so, but I'm sure you have learned a lot over the course of doing those in terms of the player experience and the technical implementation. And so I was immediately curious when I started playing Forbidden Solitaire. Is it honest, or are you goosing stuff under the hood for the sake of the experience in terms of what card is there, when I flip things over?
Okay.
And, what goes into this whole process?
Okay, interesting. And of course, one thing worth mentioning for listeners is that it's not the same as Windows Solitaire, because Solitaire is a genre of which there are many different rule sets. So this game is more like Tri-Peaks or Golf Solitaire, which lends itself to faster arcade gameplay. So different style of thing. So when we made Regency Solitaire 1, I was very careful that is just a natural deck of cards, and it's dealt into these specific layouts, and there is no rubber banding or goosing or whatever you want to call this going on in the background, because I felt that players were expecting that kind of pure experience. But when we did Shadow Hand, some of the things you could level up were literally things called like finesse, which it let you cheat and get a card that was in your favor. And also in that game, we learned that if you make the AI too good, people think it's cheating when it's not. So the AI actually makes bad decisions on purpose and doesn't proceed when it could do, right? And some of that sort of internal code is carried across to this game for the enemies. But yeah, we never do anything against the player in this game, which we could do. We discussed, like, if the player is too good in Forbidden Solitaire, should we nerf them, right? But we don't. We just let players catch up in a few hidden ways if they are not having as much success, because it's ultimately an RNG game, right? So not every layout is solvable. So you may get a bad run of cards and maybe you need a good card just to finish up, or maybe you've lost a couple of times in a row and you need some good jokers or some help, with a few special cards there. So there are some things that go on, which we don't mind. And if anyone questioned us about that, we were going to say, look, I don't want to give too many spoilers about the game, but the game is, there's an entity involved with the game, and they can do what they want with the game, because we're not advertising it anywhere as this is a straight up card game.
Yeah. I think setting it this way really helps you get away with anything like that. It's cursed after all, so whatever. If it's something, then it's blamed at that.
Exactly right. So that was my logic in case there were any complainers, but luckily we didn't have that. So
the other way of looking at it as well is, I think a lot of people assume that people have a lot of patience and want something pure, that they want to be dealt, exactly from the top of a pack of cards and shuffled perfectly and everything. But after they've lost a few times in a row, people get quite impatient, actually. I think maybe the casual gaming crowd that the original Regency Solitaire and things like that were aimed at actually have more patience for those, for getting something wrong and having to try again from the beginning than the majority of just sort of average gamers. So we have to bear that in mind. We have to keep people entertained. And if they lose interest because they're losing too much, they just bounce off it. So
I think hardcore gamers are a lot less patient than you'd think. I know there's this whole Dark Souls crowd, and I've played all of them, right? But, people don't really like to lose. They like to feel like they're about to lose, but then somehow just scrape through, really. They don't like to lose and retry. But we've got our fans of our games are like, yeah, who cares? I lost, it's Solitaire, I'll play again. And it's quick. Each level is quick, right? 3 minutes or something. So it's not like you lose a lot of progress. We're not punishing you for that.
Speaking of development, so just for transparency, where this comes from, at Forklift, obviously we're a publisher, but then we have last year started a small studio to work on our first title, and Tucker and I are quite involved in this. And the game it's a strategy game called Above, Colonies of the Mist. Both of us are big strategy fans, and we know that we think we know something about these games, like city builders and strategy games. So this was why we chose that. And so we're now getting back ourselves, both of us, with our team there. We're getting back into the thick of development, and I myself like getting back to that because I started as a developer many years ago. Actually, I started maybe in the same... Jake, didn't you start in like 2005, your first game?
I did, yes, yeah.
I think this was also the time when I started working on my first game for PlayStation 2. So we're
wow, okay, cool.
yeah, I feel like that was back when dinosaurs still went on Earth.
Yeah.
So what I was going to say is that I'm remembering now that how development is and getting much closer to that, and this helps us become a better publisher, I think, in a way. And a friend of mine, one of the co-founders of Lazy Bear Games, and who are the creators of Punch Club and Graveyard Keeper, he explained to me once, amazing games both, and they worked on other cool stuff. A metaphor he told me stuck with me, that when you start developing, you have a clear idea where you want to go, but then inevitably in the middle of it, you're going to become in a fog, and you will not know where to go. And I think we are now, with the strategy game, we've done a couple of researching moments, like where to go. And I feel like exactly we're in a fog, we're still finding our way through, which is both interesting and obviously a bit scary, which is how it has to be when you're working something new. I wonder, were you ever in this situation? Because on one hand, you're working, you're now like, you just created like a solitaire game combined with a horror game. So that's quite new. I don't think it has ever done before. On the other hand, you already worked on 7 of these solitaire games. And so that you come with a lot of experience. So I wonder if you had this moment, and if it was, what was it then?
I do know what you're talking about, but it hasn't applied as much to this because, yeah, we already knew what made a kind of good solitaire hand and what solitaire combat felt like, because I did have to innovate those mechanics and come up with them in previous games and improve them for each one as well, based on feedback and so on. So what I did, I've got a very sort of boring process where I made a massive design document of all of the ideas we could put into this game. Some of those ideas came from previous games, because every time I make a game, I don't put everything in it. Some fall to the wayside. And I collected all of these ideas. Then Helen and I and Callum went over this huge list. And for example, we had designed 80 different Jokers, and we only put 23 in the game. So, and what happened is, when Nick was coming up with the story and the enemies and the locations, we looked through all of our ideas and we said, what mechanics match his enemies and locations? And that's why everything feels so coherent, because we weren't trying to cram stuff in there that didn't work. We had a big list we could choose from and apply to the enemies. And then it just became a linear process of implementing those Joker's gems mechanics, Nick adding all the assets and then making the game, and then the levels and balancing. I mean, there's a lot to it, right? And we did throw away some things when we tested it. We threw away a joke we didn't like, or we changed a couple of the way the gems worked after testing. We've got an automated tester which runs the levels thousands of times and outputs stats, and we can use that just to balance them. But we can add in a certain power up and see how much it affects the outcome, which is like really interesting, right? And then we can change that up and put another one in, or change the numbers. So we did nerf some things or whatever, and changed a couple of things. But mostly we went to plan, and it was kind of a linear plan. It still took longer than planned, but it was just kind of a linear plan that we worked through until boom, it was ready. And it came together very quickly in the end. It was like all the parts went in. And there was a long patch where we were just adding Joker's particle effects mechanics. And then Callum and I play tested like half the game. And I said to him, like, I really enjoyed it. And I said, this is like awesome. And I said, I know devs like get into their own game and are a bit biased. But I said, like, what do you think? He said, yeah, it's really awesome. I'm really enjoying it. I want to play test it again. And I'm like, if people think like us and play it and get this feeling, we're onto something. And I think that proved to be true.
I think it also boils down, the question that I asked about the fog boils down to different studios have different strategies. Some of them choose to aim for the same genre many times in a row, like increasing their knowledge of the genre, avoiding pitfalls of the previous developments, getting some ideas that they could not implement, as you said. And then some are going for different things, either trying to find what they're good at, what they're best at, or some just prefer different things, like just avoid being in the same genre for a long time. I guess for you guys, it was probably the closer to the first one, even though there's obviously, now looking at Forbidden Solitaire, that's such a twist on the mechanic. that I think goes way, like, slightly more than just different setting, right? I think in one of the podcasts you mentioned that you had to lean more on horror than on solitaire for this one, because that was the sort of, I guess, the thing that makes it really unique compared to any other solitaire. So you had to go that way.
Yeah, the theme and so on. But the theme led itself to quite some cool mechanics because it's a wizard and it's magic. It lets you kind of do anything. Like before we were designing Regency Gardens and thinking, well, hang on, we need a statue, but what effect can it have in the game? And we had to link everything up to the theme. But when it's wizards, it's like we can have fireballs, electric and so on. But actually thinking back, there was a fog. The fog was when I was making the design doc. So it was more like a fog of design. And it happened all in my head, basically, rather than in code or in the middle of the project. So we kind of got that out of the way fairly early on. And then we moved on from there. Yeah.
Also, the designing the core game loop and up to the demo was the largest chunk of work. And as you were saying, how it all came together towards the end, it was like once we'd got that structure in place, of that first dungeon and all those things that happened in it, adding the other ones was, not simple, but it was more like painting by numbers, It's like, okay, now we know what happens next. Now there's going to be a fight. Now there's going to be this. Now this has to move this way. This has to do that. So that sort of final bit, you think, gosh, there's so much left to do. But actually, it went by surprisingly quickly, really, considering the amount of more content that added towards the end. Yeah.
You guys have this the studio. How the studio set up? You were two partners for a long time, and have been working on many games before. So, what is it like? Did you? I know you have already talked in previous podcasts about some rules. You have different spaces and stuff. It sounds like in this game, Helen, you worked mostly on marketing side, right? And then Jake, you were more in programming and game design. Was it like, I don't know, on the Regency Solitaire, Helen, you were also in the story?
I was a bit more involved in writing and design with that one. Yeah. And art direction and things like that. Yeah.
Right. So how is it working on Forbidden Solitaire together? Were there any difficult moments or because you've done it so many times before, it's actually much easier? How is it like? I know there's a lot of people who cannot imagine working with their partners and spouses just because it would become too intense. And I wonder, what is the experience for you?
Yeah, we've heard that a lot. I guess the only thing that's really difficult is, well, what was really good was we were both very, very enthusiastic about the project, and we weren't doing a whole lot of other things in our lives. We were so focused on it most of the time. So I think that it was almost like the danger of we end up just talking about it too much, or like, even at the weekend we'll be discussing it, or in the evening when we're supposed to be relaxing, we'll be like, oh, hang on a minute, I've had an idea, and that kind of thing. So I think it's very difficult if you're really that enthusiastic and you've got on a good roll with your work to actually switch off, which I guess would be very different if your partner was working, doing something completely different. You'd come home and just chat about, something totally different, but we're always often talking about work. So
it also didn't help. We were working with a team in Utah who would come online at 5 or 6 p.m., right? So sometimes they'd ping us with new art or ideas, and we'd be trying to relax at 10, 11 p.m. watching a TV show. And Helen checks her phone more than me. I have notifications off on my phone.
And there's suddenly more work coming.
And then she's like, next is this or that and the other. And sometimes we respond. Other times I'd say, look, can we just not talk about it? Let's just deal with it tomorrow. Not that there are any problems. It's just, it is important to switch off.
You need time to reset.
Yeah, it's quite hard to switch off.
And also, I that whole 15 months, I didn't take neither of us. We went on no vacations, and I worked most weekends, and I worked pretty late, and I had some sort of self-imposed crunch, which wasn't imposed on the team, but it was just, there was so much to do because I was producer and designer and programmer and checking my son's work and everything. And there was still marketing and there were deadlines. So all of this stuff meant we had to work pretty hard. But Helen and I, we've worked together a long time, and we've always said two heads are better than one. So we always discuss the design on our previous games. And we did discuss some of the design for this with you, Helen, didn't we? And also Callum, our son, who's 22, he's just done a game design and programming degree and been coding for years. And he really gets the game and also how I program. And so we were having a sort of three-way discussions, but it was getting a bit awkward. And you can imagine 3 family members now.
Yeah.
I'll let your imaginations go with that. And basically, in the end, it was simpler because Callum was coding it, if most of the design I discussed with Callum, and then we would discuss bits and bobs with Helen and the team members, and they would also test stuff and, give us feedback. But it was just easier to have 2 people working on that back and forth. So, but also separately, I suppose we were working with the team in Utah. So I was constantly working with Nick, particularly on visual stuff and on marketing. And, so it was like I had my own stuff going on meanwhile that I was doing that me and him knew about, and then we'd come back and chat to the coding team. So yeah, it wasn't like just the 2 of us working together. The other guys were very much involved all the time. And we use a Discord like you'd imagine for a team of 4 or 5 people. So we're all, even if I need to leave a message for Jake, I'm still posting it on the Discord so other team members can see it's work related, etc. So yeah. So in that sense, it was nice to have additional people to work with, and because their ideas added more, didn't they? They did, yeah. It was very good. The only awkwardness, I guess, and I don't think this is directly related to working with Helen exactly, but was because Helen was into marketing and got us into way more events than normal. We had a lot of sort of deadlines of like, make this demo here or do this thing ready for press and whatever. And then we had to decide on a launch date and everything else. And then the marketing, this sort of thing where you pencil in a thing, maybe we'll do it then. And it gradually becomes more and more solid. And then as the development's falling behind, you're like, I need to meet this deadline.
Right.
And those were kind of not set up by Helen, but proposed by Helen, then we would agree on them, and then I would have to sort of make sure that happened. And
it was being marketing led versus development led, right? And that was the slight push me pull you between different parts of the team there.
Yeah, so instead of me saying so for anything else we do now, I've literally said, because we've got this luxury, we'll market it when it's ready. So like, let's get it ready. We don't want to be Duke Nukem forever, but we want to sort of, it's ready, now you can set the thing up, rather than have to do it the other way around. And I know deadlines can be good for people, but a lot of it fell on me, the stress. So we were sort of like trying not to do that.
So it was very successful, but there was a cost, I think is the way to say it. It was the way to put it, right? It wasn't just plain sailing. There was a lot of effort and it was like the swan on the surface gliding along, and underneath the surface there's all this desperate paddling going on to try and make the deadline or get the video together or whatever. Right?
I knew this was our shot at it, and that's why I worked so hard on it, because I knew that this was our one shot that we needed to do.
It mattered,
and then it did matter, and it did work. So
it sounds like for you, Jake, it must have felt like as if Helen is imposing a deadline on you, because of course this game has a pool now. It's going to be accepted to so many different showcases, and you want to take the advantage of all of them. But to you, it sounds like Helen just made up this. Okay, let's do these 5 deadlines in a row. You need to make the demo, you need to make the press kit, the videos, the whatever.
It was kind of like that, and so that can create tension, even if it's not Helen's fault. To be clear, and these were things.
No, it was me and Nick. It was both me and Nick ganging up against you, trying to make
things we agreed on. But there's always more to do than you realize with demos and technical stuff and behind the scenes stuff and whatever. And the artist would say, we just made you this new thing to plug in, or here's some new audio, plug this in. And I'm like, it wasn't on my list, but I'd do it anyway because it was cool. So.
Yeah, I mean that's where actually bringing Callum on board, our son, halfway through development as a sort of full-time coder was really helpful. In that there was a bit more of a shared workload of those things Jake's talking about, implementing various things towards the end of the game where there was too much to implement. He was very helpful, wasn't he?
I ought to add actually that Callum, adding another programmer didn't double our output, which is what a lot of people think would happen, because he had to learn the code base and so on. Plus, I'm doing code reviews and discussing design with him. So it did increase the output, but it wouldn't double it. And you have a situation where these days, some devs say they like working with AI because they can ask AI to go and do all this stuff and it does it, and then they code review it and put it in the game. Now, we made this whole game with no Gen AI and no code AI, because also I'm using Blitz Mats, which is from 2004, and there's just no point. And so, but what I did have was a human. I was able to say, can you go and do this? And they would go and do it. Or I'd say, what do you think about this? And they would give me feedback and we would come up with better stuff. And actually that worked really well. And I was really surprised about how well that worked. And that's why he's continued to work with us after the launch. yeah, so it's been a good experience for me.
Okay. Well, I realized I wanted to backtrack just a little bit, and then we wanted to talk to you about like the industry stuff in general, and about your GDC talk, which I think like it's been 10 years, I think, this year that you've had it. Anyway, so just a short question on the marketing stuff, on the fact that this game, specifically Forbidden Solitaire, was marketed before it was made almost. Would you do this again? Would you think that's a good idea for other indies to try this way?
Yes, I think if you can, yeah, because I mean, the industry seems more risky than ever. I mean, it's always been risky, but it just seems to get riskier and riskier. One of the things that they're going back to our colleagues at Night Signal, they were talking about the project they did before that took them 5 years and then wasn't successful. And one of the ways they framed it was, well, we were hoping to do this short project and share it with Grey Alien Games, because even if we worked on it for a year and then it wasn't successful, we would have only put our heart and soul into it for 1 year instead of 5, which was like quite, they do put a lot of emotion into their work. And I mean, we all do, but in particular, I think they were really feeling that. So yes, I think anything that can test the waters and make you think, yeah, it's not just me that's excited about this idea. There are fans out there, or there are possible customers out there who are also excited about this idea, and also sort of testing the waters about how you message it. Because, if you try one thing and one part of the messaging doesn't land very well, you've got loads of time to change it, haven't you? Or, whereas if you've already developed it for months and months and months, and then you tell people and people are a bit like, oh, I don't really like that bit, or, oh, the art's a bit rubbish or something, like you think, oh gosh, I'm actually quite locked into this now and it's going to cost me a lot more time and money to redirect. So yeah, I think if you can, I mean, I know it's not possible depending on what sort of game you're making always, but it's definitely an idea to consider.
Well, there's two things. One is about the idea, and we used to have this whole thing where people said ideas are to a penny. Everybody has ideas. It's about the execution that matters, right? And that used to be a kind of thing. But then I'm sort of going back to the thing that the ideas do matter. I think the right idea really does matter. And when you hear or see the right idea done well, you know it sort of when you see it. And that's your job as publishers, right? Is to try and spot that and then facilitate that and make that happen and market it. And, and you're going to get some hits, you're going to get some misses, but you need to try and do that very well. And a lot of devs maybe don't do that. I mean, the thing is also not all devs are in this for commercial purposes, right? There are many other things we could do in our lives, right? Other jobs and so on, but we want to make it work. So you might as well take a pragmatic approach if you want to make more games and stay in business. So test the waters, see if people are interested. But even when it comes to demos, another dev asked me a while ago, recently, he said, if you'd had a demo and nobody played it, would you cancel the game? And I sort of said, well, I said, if you were the sort of indie that had no fans or following and you tried to put the game out and nobody played it, that could just be a failure of marketing or failure, you're just not well enough known. So it's not a reason to cancel it. But if you were well known and did have some kind of following and tried to get people to play it and they did not, I think that's a clear sign that you should either cancel or radically change it. So yeah, I'm a big believer in testing all the way and still keeping your projects fairly short as well, just in case it doesn't work out, you've minimized your time and emotional investment.
Okay. Yeah, this resonates a lot with us. Sorry, go ahead, Tucker.
No, go ahead, Andre.
I've been asking so many questions anyway.
Well, I just wanted to jump backwards because you mentioned Blitz Max. I think you mentioned in the GDC talk that you had made, an engine and sold that to other developers as well. And it sounds like that's the engine that you guys are still using as the basis for the Solitaire games. Yeah,
it is. And maybe you want to tell that funny story about Callum, Helen.
Oh, yeah. So obviously our son is currently 22, as we mentioned, and he's ended up working on the second part of Forbidden Solitaire. Well, I was sitting to him, chatting to him separately just about something else. And he said, you know what, that code base that Dad's been working on and that I'm now working on, he said, I realized that it's kind of supported me throughout my whole life, like throughout school, throughout university. Dad's been working away on this code base, and he's like, I really appreciate that. And as a coder, I can say, I appreciate the code base. And then I thought, oh, that's really wholesome. That's really heartwarming. And then he said, but you know what? It's like absolutely creaking at the seams. I think Dad should ditch that code base for his next title. So, you know, and maybe use Unity or something sensible like that.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's done us very well, but it might be getting so elaborate now from having been used on so many different games that it might be time to give it a rest. I'm not sure. I'll leave that with the coders.
Yeah, there's bits of code in there that are commented out from games multiple games ago and stuff like this, you know, and it's a bit creaky. But yeah, it has been good reusing the same engine, and I would recommend that.
Yeah. Is it? Am I remembering correctly that it's essentially like a basic derivative?
You know. Okay, the original Blitz was called Blitz Basic, and it came out on the Amiga. And it's basic in a sense. You have if-then statements and stuff, but you still have if statements in C++. It's just that you don't have the word then in there. Mm-hmm. Really, it's like, to be honest, it's more like C#. It's a lot closer. It's got garbage collection like C#. So Callum was able, after using Unity in C#, to understand how this worked. Because we're not doing you don't have to do memory allocation and freeing and so on. But it has its own basic commands for dealing with images and sound and so on. But I've still built a whole structure on top of that for sprites and particles and UI and game systems and everything, really. So I wouldn't call it...
You did run up against some of the limitations of it, didn't you, during this game? And it sort of informed how you solved some of the problems to quite a large extent. It's
such an old language, 2004. It's closer to 1995 when our game is set than now.
Yeah.
And there's no there was no video codec in there. And we were like, how can we make any kind of video stuff, which Nick was keen on doing? So I came up with the idea of using animated GIF files. And then reading them in and then syncing the audio up with it. And I found some code to do that somebody else had written. They were kind enough to share, but it was too slow, and I had to optimize it using very old school techniques until it was about 3 times as fast. And that ended up being what we use for the in-game FMVs. So this was quite authentic, really, a 256 color palette, low resolution GIF, animated at 12 frames per second.
Dithering everywhere.
Dithering, and the audio. So it worked out really well. But Blitz Max
cool.
It goes to show, you know, like people never change engine mid-game. And you know, I've seen people do that big mistake. But your engine, it is important, but also I'm using something so old and we've just shipped a kind of hit game. So it's fine.
Yeah. Well, I mean, certainly I can imagine pros and cons, but knowing your tools as well as you do, I think... you know, especially as somebody who used to code and does not anymore, when I occasionally mess around with it, it's like, oh, the learning curve of just getting syntax down, getting the basics down, is a hassle, basically. You know, it's like you want to do more than you can because you have to walk before you can run. So working in an environment where you're that comfortable, I'm sure is, you know, makes a huge difference.
Yeah, it definitely helps. But yeah, I don't know. I would probably recommend people use something more modern.
So I do want to talk a little bit about the GDC talk. I watched it last night in preparation. Fantastic talk. Everybody should watch it. Definitely on my top 10 talks from the 15 odd years I've been going to GDC and other conferences. So really interesting. And then it wasn't until it was over that I realized, oh, this is already 10-year-old talk. So I think you're sort of the thesis, you know, around which you've built your business for sustainability, maybe survivability at times, was pretty well formed. I'm assuming that that has informed the next 10 years of development, or, you know, your careers leading up till now. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it did. And it was often, a lot of the times people say, well, why don't you just take a risk and do this or do that? And every time we got any kind of sort of small war chest from our previous game, there was a case of, shall we take a big risk and it could all be gone and we're out of business? Or shall we serve our existing audience of fans selling on and off Steam these familiar types of solitaire games in the last 10 years or whatever, where we knew you could put in X and Y would come out the other side and it would be a profit and it would keep us going. Plus we've got tax relief in the UK, and occasionally we'd get funding for things as well, which would help. So it was always constrained what we were doing. It wasn't like we had a huge amount of money in the bank and could just do whatever. But that's why when Nick contacted us about Forbidden Solitaire, he removed one of those constraints, which was the need to pay for all of the art and audio and so on. And that meant, we could make this game and take a risk, but I didn't even really view it as a risk because, Chris Zukowski is always saying horror's this top genre. And so we did that. But yeah, I feel that my talk justified itself because it was about sustainability and it was 10 years ago and I'm still here. And many studios, as we know, have been and gone in that time period. And we're still taking that forwards, even though we've had a successful game. It isn't what I call silly money where we can buy a Ferrari and a mansion and retire. It's still a thing that we need to build upon. So we still need to look at how we update this game, how we work within sequels or the same IP or whatever, and keep doing that for another 10 years. So it's an ongoing process, and I'll be applying the same principles, just with a bit more money in the bank, which is really quite a relief.
Yeah. Much of the advice from that talk, I think, is really timeless. Focusing on shorter timelines, not overinvesting, focusing on the long tail. But one thing that I was curious if it's changed is some of your earlier games were being sold in a lot of like the, I guess, D2C casual games marketplaces outside of Steam. And I'm curious how you've seen the industry shift over the last 10 years and if there are still viable, in your eyes, viable platforms beyond Steam or other pathways to revenue that work for you guys with your other games and with this one, I guess.
Well, I guess the fact that we released on Steam, GOG, and itch.io, right? And that's it. And that kind of speaks volumes. So in 2016, those casual sites, they were already declining from the fact that first, Facebook came along and introduced free-to-play games, and then mobile or games came along, and all the people that were playing, well, not all, but a large number of the people that were playing these casual games went to mobile, and their audience diminished. So in 2016, you could still make some okay money from off Steam on these sites, but that has gone down over the last 10 years to the point where Regency Solitaire 2 did better on Steam, and we thought it would do better off Steam, and it did better on Steam. So now, it's changed. I don't think anybody can rely on those sites anymore. And it's really, we went all in on Steam with Forbidden Solitaire, to be clear. We did GOG because we thought it fits their aesthetic, this sort of retro old school game. We wanted to support a non-Steam platform as well. And that's why we did itch.io. We're not expecting any kind of big money from there, but it's nice to put stuff on there as an indie. We didn't do Epic because you have to have achievement parity and you have to use their API, and it was too much work for too little return. And we haven't done console ports because A, we're in Blitz Max, which is just not viable without rewriting the whole thing. And B, it's my opinion that console sales are too low unless you can get a Game Pass deal or some kind of platform deal. Otherwise, it's kind of like forget it for most people. And we're not doing mobile because it would have to be a premium mobile game, and we're not going to convert the whole thing to free to play. So it was just a singular focus on Steam. And also the other thing you as publishers will balk at, and Helen will curse me about, is we haven't localized the game. So you'll be like, what? It's not localized. We haven't localized to Chinese or anything. Why not? And we spoke early on to several publishers, and they would have wanted us to do that. And it would have taken us, I can do localization, to be clear. I've done it before for different titles, but it would have taken us quite a lot of extra time and effort. And already we just scraped in at the finish line. And I wanted to make this game the best possible PC English game it could be, because it's quite a Western themed audience as well, a little bit in terms of the appeal. And we would have to do a lot of changes for Chinese, for example. So we focused on the best we could. And I think the review scores speak for itself. And then that was our strategy. And it's not one that is necessarily that common, but it did work for us.
Yeah, that is interesting, because my instincts 100% would have been like, we have to localize this. But I think it's also fair to say that overwhelmingly positive rating is the single strongest recommendation that a game can have. Honestly, like more so for me at least than even reading good reviews. Like a game that's 97% positive is basically guaranteed that you're going to enjoy it. If you localize that game into Chinese, it's possible you could drop below that threshold if it does well there, because the review trends are just so different. So
agreed. I know that they're split out now on Steam, different countries and so on. But it was also just, look, I can do localization, but I don't find it fun. And I just wanted to have the most fun and make the best game we could. And I'm at this point in my career, 20 years in, where I'm not looking to min-max every aspect of the business for like finances. I need to actually maximize enjoyment and relaxation and stuff like this, and creativity and all the sort of things that I went indie for in the first place. So there's many things we could do that would make more money, sort of, but it's like, do we want to do them? We could put Callum on localization now, or something that really is best for him as a 22-year-old creative designer programmer to just do, and that's, I think, the best thing for us and him going forwards, so.
But then what would you, if you were to know more or less certain that localizing, let's say, to an additional 7 to 8 languages, including like you would need Chinese and Japanese, maybe even, if that would make you another anywhere from 30 to 50% of revenue on top, would that be worth it? Would that would change your mind on that one? Because I'm just speaking as a publisher. Obviously, if we were to work together, we would be the ones trying to push in that direction for sure. Yeah, because I would then make you this argument, and I wonder what you would say.
Well, we need to be very honest. We did have a chat with a bunch of publishers, including some very well-known ones, early on in our development after we had the Vora video. And many of the things we learned a lot from our discussions with them, and they gave us some very interesting insights into lots of things. And there wasn't anything that they were wrong about, if you know what I mean. But I think our team had a way of doing things that we were confident. So, for example, a lot of what the publisher would offer would be more marketing support and things like that. And we were quite confident that we knew what we were doing with that. We were quite confident with the sort of game we wanted to make. Jake was very confident he didn't want to spend an extra X months localizing. So, you know what I mean? It's like we could have gone that way if we'd chosen to, but on balance, at the time, it didn't feel like everybody was that enthusiastic to go with a publisher. So, and I think it's worked out okay, but it's worked out okay within the scope of being a small indie team with no publisher. So we haven't got it localized, and that's our trade-off, if you see what I mean, for having the agility to make it faster, and for having the self-determination to say,
it's definitely
we're going to do this and we're not going to do that, and make our own minds up. So that's the trade-off.
I would say, Andre, if you said, say it was to make 30 to 50% more from localization, wouldn't that depend on it being localized at launch, really, or do you just mean longer term?
One thing that I think is happening is that having an extra audience who is playing the game, then seeing that CCU rise, it's somebody that might push you for more organic reach. And so this is why it is important to have as much possible of players enjoy the game at launch. This is why we do discounts, obviously, and this is why we try to go for localization. But I think in your case, there was definitely a trade-off of time. Like, if you were to localize the game, would it mean to release it like later, let's say summer, which is not as good time as in April maybe, and then, or even move to fall, also not ideal because you don't have to spend more. And so I totally understand all the pros and cons here. It's just, it's, and also because you don't know how much localization is going to help. Obviously, if it's going to make, if the game ended up being like 5 or 10 times smaller, would it still make sense to do it? Probably not, because then localization would not have paid for itself. But as a publisher, obviously, we try to imagine the best possible scenario in our minds as one of the outcomes, and then try to prepare for that. and try to push that direction, but obviously also looking at the downside and what does it mean for us. So we're looking at a different trade-offs options, basically.
It definitely makes sense. I mean, one thing though I always look at is sort of opportunity cost as well. So let's say we could localize it now. I still think it would take a couple of months to do properly with all the languages, especially Chinese. It would need graphical assets changing as well and stuff. So let's say, and that would boost revenue by X. It would boost it, I'm sure, but we don't know how much by. The alternative is we just work on something like, for example, a DLC, which could have an attach rate of 10 to 20% or more in some cases when I talk to some people. And then that's also sits with the game for a long time and boosts revenue for a long time. So there's that sort of thing is definitely more appealing to our team than the sort of rather dry task of localizing.
Sure.
I think there's two things going on here that I can see. There's the business aspect of what you're saying makes 100% business sense, but there's also the sort of career satisfaction. I mean, we're in our 50s. We don't know how many more games we're going to make, right? How many more games have we got in us? How much,
Right.
Do we want to spend X months of that time localizing something, or do we want to spend it making more creative content and more games? So my answer might be different to Jake's. I'm very interested in language. I'm interested in writing. I do a lot of localization work with writing for other studios. So for me, I might say, yeah, I'd localize it. But for Jake, that's just not fun. So he's like, I've only got X amount of years of game design or whatever left. Why would I spend it doing localization? Different goals for different people, and depending on their interests and how much they enjoy different parts of game development, I suppose.
Yeah. This is why I'm asking this question, because I know it's a trade-off and choice, and this is the reality of working on games as a small team. That is definitely like every team is unique in terms of not only the strengths and weaknesses, but also in terms of like what motivates you, what you like to do versus like, this is too boring. I don't want to touch that. So,
and to be clear, if I could push a magic button and it would get done, and maybe there's ways to arrange this fun actually with other people, maybe, but I would do so. And partly because it's not just the finances. I do admit that people in other languages would enjoy the game more if it was in their own language. Absolutely. And it would be nice to reach them. And I'm not against that at all, to be clear. And I'm not trying to be English superior or anything like that whatsoever. It's just a sort of like time and resources thing.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of realities of a small team, in your career, actually, was it you together that moved to Vancouver and then moved back to England? What do you think, speaking of experience for indies of today, what do you think of like locations in terms of like being helpful in your career as an indie versus being a burden? And actually, because is something we see more of is that recently I think we see much more indie teams coming from Europe and other regions where there's support for that kind of stuff. And then being an indie in the US is becoming more and more difficult. It's interesting that you guys, the Forbidden Solitaire was actually a cooperation between the European team and American team. I wonder what are your thoughts on this?
Well, definitely how much funding you can get from your country, whatever that is going to make a huge difference. I mean, many different countries have currently or in the past. So, for example, I've heard Ireland used to be really great, but now it's got worse. Germany is particularly good for handing out money. Yeah. USA, I think you're maybe a bit more on your own. Canada has the whole shredding system, which is actually really good historically. In Britain, we're getting more and more resources now through various channels, and we've got the tax breaks as well. So yeah, I think where you are is really important. I don't think it's just to be aware as well of what there is where you are, whether it's something regional or something, whatever's available. You just to network and make sure you know all about it, I think is vital.
Well, that's another aspect, is where you are may or may not make networking easier or harder, right? So, I mean, we didn't go to GDC this year. We're not likely to go to the States for a while yet. Just as a personal reasons. But, when we were in Canada, we did get to network with a whole bunch of indie developers there, and, and that was really nice. And we're going to develop in the UK in a couple of weeks' time in Brighton. and we will swap information and stories and all that sort of thing. And then maybe you end up working with people, or they introduce you to somebody. You know how it works. You're a key networker, aren't you? Right?
Yeah, you're very good at this.
So, being where in the right location can help with that as well as all the tax breaks and funding and so on. And then there's cost of living, different places have different cost of living as well. And so your dollar can go further in one country than another, as you well know. And right now, our Prime Minister resigned this morning, and it's lowered the value of the pound, but that's good for us because our money comes in dollars.
Yeah.
So as long as Britain goes down the pan, we've got the money, but then is it any use in a country which is going down the pan? Who knows?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Constant source of anxiety in publishing, because I pay employees and other people in many different currencies all the time. And never before in my life have I paid so much attention to the related value of the dollar and the euro and the British pound and
RNG.
so on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the reason I asked this question about Vancouver, I should have pre-opened actually with a different question, is in your GDC talk, I think you mentioned indie apocalypse, which was happening at the time, which was, I think that was the first wave of big indie hits coming and passing, and now different realities kicked in, and people were studying that. So for many of our viewers, maybe they don't know what it is, but and I came to the PC and console industry after this indie apocalypse, so I didn't feel it myself. I was still with mobile games and console games, and also casual games as well. But I wonder, 10 years forward today, where do you guys think we are now? What is the vibe? What is the indie life is? Are these the times we're going to be thinking of good old times? Are these harsher times? Really, everything is bad. I wonder where you are and how do you feel about this?
Well, I think it has continued. There's definitely this trend of more games being released all the time. And then people's backlogs of games are getting bigger. And people talk about the attention economy, don't they? So even if you're not buying a game, you might be watching Netflix or Apple or Prime, or you might be playing this longer term, constantly updated service game. I forget the term, gas game. You might be playing one
games
of those.
as a service.
So there's a lot of things, and then there's phones, and politics and whatever. Everything's competing for your attention, and it's just getting harder and harder to stand out. And that's why I go back to the idea being important and testing the idea if you want to sort of go forwards. And then we've got AI, which is a whole massive separate topic. How's that going to impact games? Some people say you'll be left behind if you don't use it. Well, we just shipped a hit game without it. But, left behind of what? The 99% of games that don't make money, or the 1% of hit games? We don't know yet how that's going to impact. But we're not planning to use that sort of thing for now. And we want to hope that there's a market for artisan human-made games, but we're lucky enough that we built a fan base with this game that we can keep servicing with games. As long as we keep doing it fairly regularly and don't wait 10 years to release the next game, then I think we'll be okay for a little while. And Nick and David at Night Signal Entertainment, they're earlier in their careers, so they've got 20 plus years of possible future, and it's so hard to predict it. Yeah.
I mean, bigger picture, there are an awful lot of people being laid off, very experienced people being laid off from medium and larger companies as well. And they'll be looking for a lot of the jobs that the new graduates. We're lucky to have been able to give our son a job. We wouldn't have given him a job if he wasn't any good, to be clear. We wouldn't have been able to afford that. But luckily, he was very good at what he was doing. So he was an asset to the team. And we were really pleased. He and I went to a game show in London, and there were some of his peers, some people he went to university with, and some other people he knew were actually there exhibiting as well. And I thought, well, this is actually positive that there are some sort of 22, 23-year-old teams who are actually able to come and exhibit at a major exhibition. But I think, chatting more broadly to them, the outlook's pretty bleak. I think the chance of getting a job as a younger person, if you've popped up with a game design or degree, is sort of zero, really. at the moment, just because there's so many experienced people also running around looking for the same jobs. So there's definitely like a, I mean, I'm not saying anything particularly novel. It's an industry that's changing and consolidating. And, maybe we're going the same way as the music industry. Maybe it's going to head towards subscriptions or something. More and more governments are having to prop up game development, more like up film and music, because there isn't enough money to be made from actually just making games for a lot of people. So yeah, it's a shifting, how are games going to be financed in the future? It's all changing.
Yeah. Would you say though, compared to specifically 10 years, because again, the timeline, that it became much more possible for smaller teams like yours to market games directly to players. I was not in the PC and console industry. I just started a tiny build at the end of 2017. And so in 2016, I don't know how much of that was possible. Like what was the possibilities of reach for smaller teams back then? Obviously already there was so many indie hits back then also. But I think between technology availability and all these accesses to social media and the way like gamers are actually much more attuned to indies, seems like that even with the scale of the market that is being saturated more and more, and less money available, and the industry not being in the best shape, I still sort of feel like we're living the times where there's so much opportunities for indies still. And this is how we started Forklift, betting on that. Basically, there's going to be indies working on really games that are affordable for them to make, and they have a chance to really do really well with these. But again, when I'm talking about this with people, I think people disagree sometimes and sometimes agree depending on your success. So I think you guys are in this really unique position when you had been able to sustain the studio for such a long time without big hits, but with a lot of decent games that did that quite well. And now you've done something that is definitely a huge success. So I wonder if that's like, how does this change your perspective on the industry maybe?
Well, one thing I would say that has changed, well, if you think about it back then, social media kind of was maybe more on Facebook, but also Twitter, as it was called then. And there wasn't Blue Sky, Mastodon, Instagram, TikTok, right? So actually it was kind of more focused. So you could, focus your efforts on Twitter. Plus, a lot of devs back then had newsletters. But the main thing actually, as well as marketing externally, is simply the discoverability on the Steam store was better for smaller indies back then, because there were way fewer games. And also Steam changed their kind of algorithm in October 2018. And I know when that happened because some other devs and we all saw like a massive drop in our sales. So our smaller indie games stopped getting shown around the store. And that's when the more like this started to show you the most popular indie games instead of actually your games that were closer. And so that really affected things. And don't forget, a huge amount of the traffic and sales we get are from within Steam. So and I think that I'm one of these people that sort of says, if you're an indie that has not had a successful game, they shouldn't really charge you 30% because the algorithm hasn't shown you around the store. It's buried you on purpose because it thinks you're not successful. But for us, I think, okay, the 30% is worth it. They've shown around the store. Great, but back then everybody got way more visibility. Like Shadowhand got a top capsule at the top, and also you had daily deals. Back then it was one game on a daily deal. Now there's a carousel of 24 things doing daily deals.
There's another couple of really big things that have changed since then. One for us as a studio, but one across the sort of media landscape. So for us as a studio, a lot of our games were being sold on the casual portals. Now the casual portals take a much bigger percentage of sales. But they do all the marketing for you. They have their own base of customers, and they're constantly selling your game to their customers. And you don't have to do anything once you've.
It's lovely.
It's not up to you to drive traffic, to find people, talk about it on Twitter, where it doesn't make any difference. It's entirely within its own ecosystem. So that market has dwindled and gone. So that's a big change in how we sell our games. In that 10 years ago, us needing to market it was a much smaller part of what we were doing. And also going back to when I first joined in a little bit more than 10 years ago, but, thinking about Regency Solitaire, a huge thing that has changed is then the games press was really important. And there's this whole idea of many developers speaking to a small number of well-curated press who then are the tastemakers who then put that information out to the vast majority of gamers. So they're kind of a bottleneck of taste. Whereas what's happening now is much more sort of diversified. So you're getting lots of different gamers and groups all talking to streamers and podcasters and like yourselves, or just posting something on Instagram. So it's like many people speaking to many people. And then from that, it fans out in popularity and there's kind of crossover. So it's a completely different kind of model in terms of media and information distribution. And it's much more free flowing. And in a way, you've got more control and that you can talk to those podcasters. You can put something on Instagram, on TikTok, on, etc. But the chance of it all being gathered together and curated by somebody who then says, this is good and tells everybody and everybody then goes and checks it is less. So it's a different model. And even Steam, to see how it pans out.
Even Steam or Valve had some kind of curation back in the day about who did the panels and stuff.
Yeah, there was even Steam Greenlight. You couldn't even get your game on Steam in the past. You had to wait to be invited in.
Right, so. That was where the first indie apocalypse fears came from, I think, was when Greenlight was a thing. It was like, oh my God, anybody can get on Steam. And to be fair, that's how Regency Solitaire got on Steam. So we might not have, But and then and then they eventually got rid of it and just brought the fee in, right? And that is when everybody was like, "Oh my God!" But to be honest, those were the good times. I've seen how well the wishlist converted. Then I've seen how much visibility you got. You have this thing on Steam, you well know. You can trigger a visibility round for your game, where you would pair it with an update and you'll get some extra views. It used to be you got 1 million front page views when you triggered one of those. Okay, you do not get 1 million front page views now. You get a few extra views to only people who've wishlisted it already and stuff, which is okay, sure, but it's not the same at all. So I think the store itself has changed, and they're obviously constantly introducing new things to try and help indies to a certain extent, like the change of Popular upcoming to this upcoming calendar now, which actually by all accounts is quite positive for quite a lot of indies. So
I think it's going to be in the end. It looked scary, but I think in the end it's going to be a net positive for smaller games.
The other thing I was remarking on the other day that's kind of ironic is that in the past we used to design our casual games so that the first hour was a playable demo, and then people would decide whether they were going to buy it after an hour. That was the point of conversion. And for a long time, the idea of doing that with your sort of typical Steam game was considered, quite square, and you wouldn't want to do that. And now it's come full circle that now Steam Next Fest is a huge thing, and everybody's expecting to get a free demo and try a game of an indie game in particular before they decide whether to buy it. So it's almost as if the casual model has come full circle. But unfortunately, they're not doing the marketing for us. We have to do the marketing ourselves. So there's plenty of work for indies, I'd say, and to try and get their game seen and heard about.
Yeah, it's not easy. I think it wasn't easy for us, and it's definitely not going to be easy for new indies. And that's why teaming up with, good publisher or another indie studio who's got the missing roles in your studio is a good idea. And why funding is important. It's all important.
Yeah.
Would you did you mention that you had collaborated with other studios before? Is that something you would try again? As obviously, you said that like working with the Night Signal was great, and you would maybe try this again. But in general, do you think is that a viable option for other indies to try, or just? I think part of that why I think maybe your collaboration was so fruitful is that because you guys had so much experience, and Night Signal were so good at their end of the deal, so it probably was pretty clear who needed to run with what. And when it's less experienced studios, I wonder if that would work or make the project more messy in the end.
Yeah, I mean, there could be egos or fighting, especially if but we had a clearly defined role, so we would defer to the other. So I think that worked. It could work for the right studios, but it could also not work. And you do hear many horror stories. But I mean, that can even just happen with hiring contractors or even employees. So you always take a risk when you work with someone else. I guess the thing would be to do your due diligence on what they've done before and would they work with you well, and then perhaps do a trial run, that whole kind of thing, really, I would suggest. But it definitely worked for us, and I know other indies have been watching that with interest, saying, well, who could we team up with? And yeah, as long as they want to make another game with us, that's a more obvious route for us than teaming up with a different studio now. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think both of us have collaborated with various other people on different projects along the way as contractors, or with your work with Dejaban, for example, and other things like that. And I mean, I've had one or two less positive experiences, but the vast majority have been really positive experiences. And I've definitely got some insight into how other studios do things, and what tools they use, how they organize themselves, their approaches to things. And it's all learning, right, at the end of the day. And yeah, I really enjoy it. So,
well, and I think Night Signal Entertainment said that they were impressed by the amount of sort of spreadsheets we did. So not just
yeah, we were quite organized.
Yeah, like Helen had all these giant marketing spreadsheets. I had all these schedule spreadsheets and to-do lists and stuff. And I was working through those and kind of coordinating everybody from the middle of that. And that did work well. And I mean, one thing I said to them early on is, maybe this was foreshadowing, but I said, if this game takes longer than we originally said, don't worry, because I will finish it. I finished 16 other games. I'll get this one done and it will be good. It will be good quality. And I did deliver on that, but it did take longer than...
But they said at the time, yeah, that's not one of our concerns.
Yeah.
They said, we're not worried that you're not going to finish this.
Yeah.
There might be all sorts of other things that crop up, but you not seeing this through to the end as efficiently as possible is not one of them. So, so that was good.
There's some whole kind of triangle thing about, do you want it done on time? Do you want it done cheaply? Do you want it done good
well,
quality or whatever? So, pick two type thing. Certainly when you work with anyone else, reliability is important, and being able to get on with them is important. But ideally you also want something good come out of that. And I think we kind of got all three with Night Signal Entertainment, which was very lucky.
Interesting. Cool. So one thing in terms of advices for indies or just like a role model is, how do teams pick the genre and the type of game they work on? For you guys, it was first match 3 games, then card games, then strategies. We had made a few, right? So it was like T-minus 34. I forgot the name of the game.
T-minus 30, yeah.
T-minus 30. And a couple of other strategy games, which were also card games, so RPGs. To us, like with Tucker, because we built the forklift, was always like, we were always thinking of our genres as something that is systemic, something that could be replayed so many times, and that's intrinsically not about like a story, but something that you enjoy playing. The fun comes out of the actual process. I wonder what informed for you that choice. Why did you go for these genres? Was it just the era? Because when you started, casual games were more sort of what people chose to play, or was there any other reason for this? How did you choose the kind of games you were making?
Well, I've got this Venn diagram on my blog somewhere years ago, and it's like games you would like to make, games you can make, meaning technically or financially or whatever, and games that have a market, right? And you need to intersect all of those. And when I first started making match 3 games, I was actually making a different type of game. And I suddenly realized it was overscoped, and there wasn't a market for it. And I just played Bejeweled. And the thing with Bejeweled by PopCap is it's a really good game. And I really enjoyed it. And I thought I could make one of these with the Christmas theme and so on. And it wasn't deliberately like a pure cynical cash in. It was like, I enjoy this game and want to make my own spin on it. And then that did okay. I was inspired enough to kind of keep going in that for a while and get good at it. So yeah, it was there's a market, I enjoy it, and I can make it. And that was initially why. Same with Solitaire. When Helen came up with Regency Solitaire idea, it was clearly suitable for the market, and we wanted to explore that theme. And we did that. But then we also became trapped in Solitaire. Like, I'm joking that I've been cursed to make Solitaire for like 30 years, because in 95 I actually made a version of Windows Solitaire for my Amiga, and I sent it to an Amiga magazine, but they didn't put it on their disc. So I've actually been doing Solitaire technically for 30 years, and I feel kind of trapped, because it's when you get better at a genre, it's like a safe thing and you have fans, and it's like, do you wildly shift genre and theme and throw away those fans? But even so, we're glad our fans came with us, the majority, to Forbidden Solitaire. But even so, there was a hard calculus that was like, look, there aren't that many of them, and if we make more new fans, that's okay as well. But I think, and also Night Signal.
Yeah, one of the things Night Signal was saying is they thought horror fans were fairly genre agnostic. So as long as the horror storytelling was good, people wouldn't mind whether it was a card game or a dice game or whatever. Whereas obviously Solitaire fans had certain expectations of what is a Solitaire game. So we were able to move into horror knowing that hopefully most of their fans would give it a try, just because it was A, horror, and B, a Night Signal game. So that was a really good starting point. Yeah. Whereas if they decided to move into Solitaire and make a non-horror game, it wouldn't have been the same maths at all. It wouldn't have worked. So
I mean, some of the people, even our fans, were like, is this game only 5 to 6 hours long? How many levels? Only 60 levels? We're used to thousands of levels in these other Solitaire games or whatever. And I was trying to say, look, it's an experience. It's not really a sort of like sit down and plug out thousands of hours of Solitaire. It's a thing you go through as an experience and go, whoa, okay, that was cool. And that's how we've been selling it.
Back when I had a little bit of participation in this casual market back when Big Fish Games and other existed. And so one thing I learned back then is that a lot of the casual players enjoy more of the same. So this is why there was a lot of match 3 games, like solitaire games, hidden object games. Players wanted to more of the same thing, but just with different pictures. But they just wanted to continue the same flow and being in that game. Which is quite different from Forbidden Solitaire, obviously. And would you say that in the end you have predominantly horror type game players more than solitaire players enjoying Forbidden Solitaire? Or I don't know if you know that based on like how you can actually get this data.
What do you think, Helen?
I don't know. We're definitely getting a large number of people saying. But obviously, it's a game that's gone wider anyway. But we are getting a large number of people saying, oh, I didn't think I'd enjoy Solitaire, or I've never played Solitaire before, but I'm going to try this. So yeah, perhaps more people are trying it who were originally horror fans or who just liked the art style and thought they'd give it a go.
Well, we've had...
And some of our previous games, which people would come into thinking, oh yeah, I definitely like Solitaire, so I'll try this.
We've definitely had a lot of people say, I've played all your previous games and this one's great. So, I mean, they're definitely the fans that are coming along for the ride, but a few of them, the more very casual-minded fans, are maybe scared off by the theme, even though it's not really horrible horror. It's funny, hammy horror, but if they're scared, they're scared. So, but yeah, we've definitely had new people play it, and I think a lot of horror fans did come to it from Night Signal Entertainment. It's quite clear a lot of them tried it, and new people. That's what you always want, right? New people. But the number one rule of marketing is sell to your existing customers, right? Obviously, you want to expand that base, but we needed to appeal to the Solitaire and the horror fans first, and that's what it is, right? So,
yeah, cool. So on the, I guess maybe the last question from that is sort of related to GDC talk. You've been really seems like you've been really keen on logging your hours. And like, where do you spend them? Which really, I think I'm a big fan of spreadsheets as well. Myself, Tucker would say definitely that. How did Forbidden Solitaire rate on your per hour income? Was that the outlier on that graph? How did it do since you worked in the game for 15 months?
Yeah, good question. So, you know what? If this was any other game, probably I'd know the figure on the top of my head of how much it had made per hour now. But that also comes from a sort of financial insecurity mindset where I'm constantly monitoring all of these things and the finances and everything.
So
And because I'm Mr. Chill now, because the game has made money, I'm just like, oh, we just made another X $1,000, darling. Shall we go to lunch? And or I'm in the garden messing around, whatever. So I'm less up to date on that. But I would say this: I did look at the number fairly soon after launch, and what it was a solid hourly wage initially, right? But it's not the biggest outlier is Spooky Bonus, because that took 3 months and made like 150,000 net, and it was a really good. But that took 10 years to bring that much money in, and that's a really good dollars per hour. But that's hard to repeat now. That was maybe some games do hit games, but this was not even that unusual for casual games back then that were made quickly and with just the right game for the market in 2013, and which So yeah, I mean, longer term, I think it's going to be extremely solid dollars per hour, and it may be Spooky Bonus. I don't know, but that that was pretty unusual, that game. But I'm happy with it anyway. Yeah.
I think many indies don't realize, and this is our job as a publisher to care about that and long tail and make sure that we get as much as possible for the developers through all the different ways you can make money with games. And even not in just the English speaking markets, but others as well. Where I was going with this is the fact that many indies don't realize the importance of this long tail. So I think seeing already the kind of success you had with Forbidden Solitaire in like less than 1 year, like was it 3 months? Was it?
It's less than that. I guess it came out April the 30th, so it's less than 2 months.
Yeah, less than 2 months.
Yeah.
So if you think about what it's going to make in like a year, 5 years, 10 years, it's going to be really, really solid numbers.
Yeah, and I've got projections for all of those in a spreadsheet, right? So, like for example, the median is week 1 revenue times 3 should give you year 1, for example, right?
Yeah.
Now it can be higher.
Actually, even better with lower. With overwhelmingly positive, I think you'd probably do much closer to 4 than 3.
Yeah, and stuff like DLC updates going on sale. Yeah. Well, already we're approaching 2 times. Okay, already in like just a couple of months, and we've got good sales coming up and stuff like this. So I think we will be 3 times. I think it could be 4 or even 5. That's year 1. Then you've got year 3, year 5, and so on. And then you've got followed up with DLC or sequels and all that sort of stuff. Possibly localization, possibly ports or something later on. Who knows? But yeah, you do need to be in it for the long haul. And that was part of our survival strategy. My whole GDC talk was this back catalogue of games generating enough revenue to keep us going on a monthly basis, as well as whatever we had saved up or funding to move forward. And I think our past games now will be paying our son, actually, and this game will be paying us, something like that.
Nice. So I'm sure you haven't made any decisions, or hopefully haven't spent too much time thinking about the next game, enjoying the success of this one for a little bit. But I am curious, what's next beyond support for Forbidden Solitaire. If you've had any thoughts about, how this changes your model, or what kind of project you want to work on next.
Well, I kind of dove straight out of marketing Forbidden Solitaire because I was still on a bit of a marketing high. So I dove straight out of that into marketing another team's game.
Nice.
So I'm just working on a different game for a bit. And that's, it's good. It's kind of got some similarities. It's called Imprinted. It's like a fake OS game.
Oh, nice.
And it's also slightly spooky, but it isn't hammy. It's like a bit more serious and cerebral. So that's how I've coped with the kind of intervening period while we decide what to do next, is to go and, kind of help out another team. And they're a really nice team as well. So that's been nice for me. But yes, I probably should actually put my feet up a bit more at some point.
Well, I've been sort of relaxing, but I spent weeks fanatically weeding and repairing our lawn, which had become full of weeds.
I followed that story on Twitter for sure. Yeah.
It looks a lot better now. But
it was the cleaning up mechanic. He had
to. I just had this nervous energy after shipping, and I needed it to go somewhere that wasn't sitting at the computer. But we have definitely had discussions about the possibility of DLC, shall we say, because it kind of makes sense for this type of game. You know, it's a level-based game where we can certainly add more content, and that could be quite cool, and it could do quite well in the long term. So we've had that discussion. We've definitely discussed a sequel. We've had several different iterations of ideas, you know, just as a discussion internally without necessarily committing to anything, and even discussed different types of games. But there's this big thing, I think, with a lot of indies that have a hit game. Sometimes they wait 10 years to release a game and then everyone's forgotten about it and the markets have moved on. Or they release something that's too different. And I really believe, a bit like the casual audience, going back to them, people want more of the same but better. So if we were to do a sequel, we think it should be, you know, Forbidden Solitaire 2, and for it to feel like that, but add in any of the stuff that we didn't add in before that would make it extra cool and whatever. So if we were to do such a thing, we would be better off doing that than saying, let's go and make this or this or this, even though the creative sides of us would like to jump ship. That's why indies do it. They get fed up with something.
Yeah.
But because this was only 15 months and not 5 years, you know, we could do that. I mean, I might get it out of my system by doing some smaller game jams and doing something else, but it definitely makes sense to kind of work this whilst we can, and that would be part of the ongoing strategy. We haven't got, you know, retirement money yet, right? So that's on our minds, and we would need to keep working for a bit longer to make that happen.
Yeah.
Right.
Also, we've got loads more ideas. You know, there is a lot more juice in the Forbidden Solitaire universe. Whether we, you know, what exactly we do with it and which way it goes, we haven't finalized yet. But there's all sorts of ideas, and many of them are good ones. So just like watch this space, I guess. If you see any more strange videos coming out, filmed in car parks, like in 6 months' time, you'll know what we're at it again.
Yeah, I don't want to give away too much yet because there's still internal discussions about all this.
Yeah, we haven't decided anything for sure, but we've definitely been shooting shooting the ideas around.
Nice.
Yeah, and it's looking positive.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, thank you both so much for your time and for all of the information about the game and your own backstories. I think, you know, for us as developers and publishers, it's always fascinating to learn not just about the games and the decisions that go into them, but about the people who build them and, you know, where they came from and how they arrived at the moment of, you know, creation. And that's what this podcast is all about. So cool. I really appreciate the candor and the time.
Thanks for having us on.
Yeah.
And
it's been a great conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sure we could talk for hours. And good luck with your game as well. Obviously your main business too, but specifically your game, I'm saying right now.
Thank you.
So.
It's an interesting journey for sure.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. One question I wanted to ask but didn't is like I assume you guys continue to work on just one game at a time, not doing like 2 games at a time or something. Yeah. And this is definitely our challenge that we have.
It's been a challenge for me before. I do not like multitasking. There's just something to be monotasking where you 100% load your brain up with that game and you go to sleep thinking about it and you wake up thinking about it and then you percolate on it when you go for walks and stuff. And I have had multiple projects and I find it very stressful because I can't give each one my full attention. So that's me. Different people work differently.
But I guess for Helen, because you just, as you just said, as soon as you shipped, you already started working on helping other teams.
Yeah, even actually before we were shipping it, there was a little lull before my mega marketing push, and I did end up helping to organize a showcase of 150 games on Steam, complete with streaming showcase and all these other things as well. So. But I think that's the other side of indies that we haven't really touched on, is that what that was a collaboration of indies who all had something in common in their genre. We all had games with some aspect of a fake OS or desktop simulation is another way of describing it. So we created this event and we went and organized it all ourselves, and it actually did pretty well. Most people got quite a few new wish lists. We made a lot of other friends. We got a lot of advice of each other. And that's kind of a bigger example, but I do think indies, they're not kind of competing against each other in quite the same way. Even people with the same genre, you might think, oh, someone's going to buy game A or game B. They're not. If they like that genre, they're going to buy both games, let's be honest. And if one of you can point someone towards the other one, or tell them that project's happening, that's just more to the good, really. So there's that aspect also, which I do really enjoy of, it isn't directly commercial, I suppose. It's a little bit kind of voluntary or stuff in the background. But again, it's kind of a learning experience, and I've definitely met some really interesting people. I managed to share some experience and pass a few things on as well. So
yeah. I think I agree definitely. And about the indies not competing, you can potentially argue in some specific ways, but in general, I do agree that it's indies working together when you can get the best results. Because, and this is why I believe that indies, and not just developers, but also publishers, becoming more transparent is a great thing. That we're trying to do as much as possible in there, sharing our numbers, sharing our insights, and sharing just like how this game did versus how it did here. Because this gives so much visibility to indies to compare themselves where they are, like how they can do more. Is it worth to going this route versus this route? So I'm hoping there's going to be more indies and more publishers sharing quite openly. There, even the numbers that usually you would say should be under NDA. I don't believe that we have many numbers that should be that way. Honestly, I would be basically, if I had the time, I would post more and just share more. And but for me, it's the challenge of like where to take the time to find to frame these numbers and actually so they reach more people. Because if you just share them without giving the context, it's not something that gives you any insight, right? So you have to give the right context for it. So
yeah, I guess that's something else we've done on a sort of smaller personal level for quite a few years, is have a Patreon where you can pay to get certain information, but a lot of it is also just free. And we do tend to post some stuff just about development and marketing and stuff in general, but also we do these slightly deeper dives into how our games have done, or what segments of our business are, making which money in any given year, or how we're spending our time and that kind of stuff, just for exactly the same reason, just to share information with other indies and get their comments and hopefully be helpful, I guess, on their journey.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you guys again for coming. It was really interesting to talk to you. I'm hoping that there's going to be maybe GDC 2027. There's going to be another talk, like the follow up on the previous one, with all your learnings from Forbidden Solitaire and from the last 10 years. So yeah, thank you for coming, and we've been looking out for news from you on both Forbidden Solitaire and what's next after it. We'll be waiting.
All right. Cheers, chaps.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.